City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded Monday, May 6, 2019.
So with that, I have 6 p.m. We will call the City Plan Commission meeting to order. We'll start out with a roll call, please.
Weeza.
Here.
Kneebone.
Here.
Arnson.
Here.
Cooper's excused. Haynes is excused. Hoppy's excused. Rice.
Here.
We do have a quorum, so we will continue with our agenda. Item number 2 is the report of the April 1st meeting on page 3 of your packet, Commissioners. And I want to remind you that we have a small group of Commissioners, so we don't have to wait for someone else to make a motion if we choose to.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Alder Kneebone.
Of the April 1st meeting.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Arnson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 3 is a request from the City of Stevens Point for easements to TDS Metrocom LLC for the purpose of constructing underground cable and substation at the following properties: 1748 Water, 3049 Church, and 4201 Industrial Park Road, page 15 of your packet. Director?
This is part of the rollout for the citywide fiber with TDS. They do need 3 locations located on city property for specific easements. Those properties were outlined in the agenda packet. The first one is on Water Street, just near the water tower. The second one is on 3049 Church Street, used to be the former Normington Dry Cleaners site, in between South Point and Domino's. And then the third one would be near the fire station number 2. We have reviewed it. In terms of compensation, we have been working with them on other swaps in terms of different locations for conduits. So we feel this is in the best interest of the city. Staff would recommend approval of the easements as stated.
Any questions from the Commissioners? Comments from the audience? We'll start over here, sir. Step to the lectern. Name and address for the record, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Dave Ridlin, and I live at 1756 Water Street with my wife Victoria. And we're here tonight to urge you to deny the placement of electronics utility building on the vacant lot on 1748 Water Street, next to our home. This shed would be unsightly and aesthetically wouldn't fit into our residential neighborhood. We have been working with the Parks Department to plant trees and beautify this space, and this green space is greatly appreciated. We feel a more suitable location for this shed is within the fenced area where their utility items are kept and stored. Also, because all electronic devices emit electromagnetic radiation, and given the proximity of this shed to our home, we are concerned with the safety of this electronic equipment. Please ask yourself if you would like this built next to your home. We trust that you will do the right thing for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alder Nabel? You can push that little piece in too if you need to.
Hello, Commission. Thank you. Cindy Nabel, District 3, 1100 Phillips Street. I did take a look at this property with the couple that came up that would like to have this changed, and I also agree that that is right next to their house. And there's birds there. They have all these lilacs along that fence line where they have a lot of different birds that are always there every year. And I don't understand why it couldn't be behind the fence on the property that we already have with the water tower and other items that are electrical over there. It'd be behind the fence, which makes it less visible for the neighborhood, but not only that, for anybody that just thinks going by, let's go see what that is. It would be behind that fence. There's quite a bit of area back there that it would work. It's right where all the rest of it is. So I would like to say that really try to think about the fact that it would be even safer for this container or this shed that they're making to implement this project. I think it just would be really want to keep things nice, that they're not the only people that spoke about this to me, that live over across the street from it also. They would really like to be able to see that space be there, and that road goes in, and so it still would be accessible for anybody that needed to work on that conduit. So hopefully we can really look at this a little bit better, where it's not visible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, commissioners, thoughts?
I guess given the neighbors' concerns, has the city been made aware of those concerns? Have they been able to discuss alternative locations with TDS? What do we know about the plausibility of possibly moving the location?
So they have looked at some alternative locations. This one met all of the requirements. It's a public lot. There is some screening there, and we could certainly work with the Parks Department or whomever to add some additional screening.
Okay.
If the neighbors think that's necessary, we are Tree City USA. I would be completely okay with adding some screening to this.
Yeah.
There was some suggestion of putting it within an existing fenced area. I'm not entirely clear on where everything was going to end up, but is that something that, I'm assuming they're talking about maybe within the water tower property or in the
Right.
fenced area around that?
Yep, and that's what we
Would
look
that
at.
be
So
possible for city
right now,
purposes?
that's a secured area.
Right.
The police department uses that as well as a couple of other departments. So it's not,
Wrong. That's not where we're talking about. You move it 30 feet back to the west and it's behind the fence. We're not talking about putting it over by the water tower. Behind the lilacs there. Go over there and drive over there and look at it.
why don't you point to the screen, sir, and tell me where you're talking?
You remove that block.
Okay, this is the lot. Here's where they come into
Right.
this area. See these lilacs?
Right.
There's a chain link fence right here.
Right?
This is where they want to put it.
Yep.
Right here, you see my finger?
Yes,
This is where it should go.
yes. Behind the fence in the
Behind
secured
fence
area.
there, Yeah.
That's exactly where we're talking about. The water tower is in that
Yeah.
secured
I
area.
don't see any reason why it couldn't be put there.
Okay. So, sir, we need to keep decorum here. If you have comments, we'll call upon you in a little bit.
I don't have any more comments.
Thank you. All right. So does that explain things a little bit more, Commissioner?
Yeah, that's,
And that building that you see there is used by the police department, the streets department. I think we used to store some sheriff's department equipment in there too. That's why the area is secure.
so that parcel that extends out to the east is not fenced, but it's city property.
Right,
Here.
right. Any other questions from commissioners?
The neighbor addressed some concerns about, electromagnetic radiation. I don't know the plausibility about this. I didn't go over these specs here. I assume this is running on relatively low voltage. I mean, this isn't like a high voltage
Right.
substation or anything like that. Do we have any other, I guess, concerns regarding noise or electrical?
It's my understanding there wouldn't be noise. Director Lemke, do you have any insight into this as far as the amount of electricity that something like this might put out? And I'm only asking you because you happen to be here and you've dealt with TDS on this, or maybe Director Badoon, in regards to the fiber installation.
No, if you look at the site right here, that side of the site is filled with telco equipment.
Okay,
The only thing that would make a noise on that side is the fact that one provider has a generator.
same low voltage type operation.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, right. Did that answer your question, Commissioner? Yep. Alder Dugan, I'm sorry, Alder Navel, one more time?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you giving me a second chance here. One of the comments I think that David was trying to explain was that you had mentioned a secure, because it's a secured area and they don't want it in the secured area. Is that correct?
Well,
Right, that's what I'm saying, you do not. And I wanted to say that that area is, and David could attest to this, that it is never locked. It's open, that gate is always open, so it's not really, I know what you're saying, but it's not in an area that is locked off to anybody to go into. So they could still have the only key being with the company and not with the city, so that it would be in an area that, because that was what the concern was. And I know that I myself spoke with Director Badoon, and so did David, so maybe that would help on a little bit of what Director Badoon might know about the situation and what, if it could work if it was back there.
Great,
So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Director, anything to add?
Scott Badoon, Director of Public Works. I do, and I guess a part of it is even part of when I know when I spoke with Alderman Abel, thinking about some alternatives and all. And since then, even doing some research internally, the things that had begun even before I had started here in regards to some of the storage of equipment and storage of vehicles and things we have. While currently we do not lock it, we have still been talking about things that have been on hold with talks to City Hall and stuff, as far as additional garage space there, storage of vehicles, storage of additional equipment there. In conjunction with that, we would probably be looking to secure that area again. At least that would be our desire. That would then want us to get TDS out of there. So it really would be, as we presented it, the way we would like to have it.
Okay.
Just to keep them outside of that area, so it gives us the flexibility to put things where we need to, store equipment where we need to, operate how we need to, and keep it secure if we need to.
Perfect, thank you.
If I could.
Absolutely, Commissioner.
Do you have plans for the rest of that parcel? Do you foresee the utilities department or the city needing that for storage, parking, anything?
And that's still things I'm just going through. There was otherwise a plan to extend essentially where that garage is, extend that more. We're also looking at then that's going to require us to relocate some of the things that are stored there now, which will probably then push that out front and very likely include the area to which we'd be talking about for this. So a lot of the light poles and arms and things that we currently have out there would most likely then have to be moved so that we could get access to them. Because a new shed, if we put one out there, would most likely block the access we currently have. So we'd have to move some things around. I'm not sure that's all been thought of, because we've even expanded the number of vehicles and other equipment we'd like to park back there since that original plan was put together. So it will probably be coming back around here shortly. And I don't want to cut ourselves off and think we can't accomplish what we need to, then we're looking for someplace else to go because we moved it back and didn't just give ourselves the room we need before we plan that out. So I do anticipate using it.
Okay. Any other questions? Absolutely.
I'm trying to pinpoint exactly, it's gonna be on this side of that row of lilacs?
Yep, you can see where the,
Right in that little, okay.
yes. So we can certainly add some more
Does it
screening
ha-
around there.
Yeah, I would like to see that be buffered better. Could it be moved a little, I don't know which direction the map's pointing,
So
toward the.
north
toward
is
the- okay,
facing up.
Could it be moved a little bit more to the north, alongside where that driveway comes in, as opposed to the south side closer to the individual's home? Up where the lilac shrubs stop?
Sure. And I
Like-
think what Director Badoon was talking
Yeah,
about
like
is
a
they
little bit
chose the
more there,
location.
Or do you anticipate having to widen the driveway to get equipment in? Is that?
Well, that is
part of
one
the
of our concerns, since we don't necessarily know, but we could probably adjust it somewhat in that direction. Because the other thing too is we want to keep it back a little bit just for snow plowing and things, even though we could put bollards around it. We want to give ourselves a little bit of cushion on that side as well. But we can talk with TDS and see about making an adjustment. My guess is there's probably a little bit of wiggle room within there.
Right. Okay. So what I'll do then is, to help address some of the concerns that we had, I will move to allow the easements as proposed with 1748 Water Street approved conditionally that we take it as far north as reasonably allowed, and that we provide additional screening around the facility where we can.
A second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Rice. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 4 is a request from the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Stevens Point for easements to Wisconsin Public Service for the purpose of constructing utilities at the following properties: 1017 3rd Street and the properties surrounding that in relation to the development, beginning on page 27 of your packet, Commissioners. Director, you have the floor.
So items 4 and 5 kind of go together. This relates to the Lullaby development with Merge for the mixed-use development on that site. With that, there needs to be the relocation and burying of power lines, and because it's a main line, it extends a lot further than just that lot. So what they're looking at doing is relocating some of these lines and burying others. Since the city and redevelopment authority own property in that area, they do need a recommendation by the Plan Commission before finally acting on those easement agreements. So I'll start west and then I'll head my way east. This is in front by Pioneer Park Place. This extension would go from essentially Pioneer Park Place all the way to Union Street in terms of relocation and burying of those power lines. The areas of concern for easements relate to two particular areas for the redevelopment authority and one for the city. Right here is the Crosby Street parking lot with the WPS site here and Piffner Pioneer Park here. It does need to cross the Crosby parking lot. Currently, there are overhead lines. They'd be looking at burying those lines. So this would be an easement for the city. The rest of this area would remain on WPS's lot as well as within the right-of-way area. On the redevelopment authority lot and working with the Wanta and Son development. On this lot, this is Centerpoint Drive on the southern edge here. This is where the parking lot is, and then the Wanta development would be north of that, and then their access drive through the middle of that. So they'd be looking at taking a small easement on the very southern edge of the parking lot, coming down 3rd Street, and then going back up through that easement agreement. I've spoken with the Wantas. They are fine with that, and their electric service will come off of that line, so that's actually a benefit to them. And then finally, since we have not transferred the property yet, on the Lullaby property, they'd be looking at easements along the eastern edge to service the Guzman Building, the Dunright Cleaners, and there's a duplex up here, and then also a little bit on the southwest corner. There may be the thought when we transfer this property that the developer will grant the easements, but I wanted to keep this project moving, so therefore it is before you for a recommendation for those easements for WPS to provide power to the site.
Okay. Any questions for the director? Comments from the audience? Seeing none, bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I guess I did have a question. It wasn't entirely clear from these maps just what the construction was, but my understanding is a lot of it is moving overhead utilities underground.
That's correct.
Is that the red with the P circle
Yep.
power pole?
Yes.
And I wasn't quite sure what was existing versus what was proposed.
So the red is existing, and then the blue is proposed.
All right.
Okay.
Is this going to affect any other of the private property owners in the area? Are they going to incur costs for
No,
this project at all?
the developer is paying for these costs.
Alder Nebo?
Okay, I would move approval for the request from the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Stevens Point for easements as listed on the agenda.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
We'll give it to Commissioner Hartson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 5 is a request from the City of Stevens Point for easements to Wisconsin Public Service for the purpose of constructing utilities at the following properties, 1111 Crosby Avenue and the Centerpoint Drive area on page 27. As the director said, this crosses both Redevelopment Authority and City of Stevens Point property, so they are related. What are your wishes?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Okay, do we have a second? Seconded by Alderperson Nebon. Comments from the audience? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 6 is a public hearing and action on a request from Wolf Group LLC, representing the property owner for a conditional use permit to utilize the traditional neighborhood development overlay district standards for reduced setback to construct an addition to 2932 Alice Court on page 32 of your packet, Commissioners. Director.
So this is just off of Cleveland Avenue on Alice Court. The property owner is looking to do a small addition to the east side of their property. You can see from the aerial, it's a fairly odd-shaped lot being on a cul-de-sac, making it challenging to meet many of the setbacks. And furthermore, this is an area of the city that was developed, some time ago, and our zoning codes have changed. Many of the homes do not meet setbacks currently. Therefore, we've established a traditional neighborhood overlay district that allows property owners to reduce their front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks, and rear yard setbacks. Front yard setbacks can go down to 12 feet, and side yard setbacks can go down to 4 feet. The applicant is looking to utilize those setbacks to construct their addition on the east side of the home. The addition is about 18 feet by 15 feet 4 inches. They're looking at obtaining a reduced side yard setback of 4 feet and a front yard setback of 19 feet. As I'd mentioned, in most of these areas, most of these homes within this area do not meet current setback requirements. We do feel that this would be consistent with the neighborhood and wouldn't have any adverse effects on the surrounding property owners. Here's another aerial with just the planned addition you'll see to the east. One of the things they'd like to do is bring it out flush with the home, and that's the reason for the request for the 19-foot setback in the front yard. And these are just some quick renderings of the home. This is the end of where the addition would take place. We would recommend approval of that addition. Does feel like it blends within the neighborhood. Don't see really any adverse impacts. The only thing that we typically put on situations like this where we have a small side yard setback is that they do add rain gutters to make sure that their stormwater stays on their property.
Okay, any questions to the director?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Go. The comment about the 2-foot eave overhang and you know, essentially the snow sliding off the roof is going to plop onto the neighbor's property, which is right next to a garage, and I think the stormwater issues can be addressed in the eaves troughs or the rain gutters. I don't know that that's an issue. I don't know if the neighbors have been contacted or have weighed in on this at all, but it seems like you're getting a pretty small gap between the roofs, between the garage and the addition there.
Okay.
Is that a concern?
I think we might be able to address that here shortly. Sir, could you come to the, I need you to come to the lectern, please. Name and address for the record.
I'm Brad Wolf with Wolf Group, 1317 Franklin, and yes, we're not going to build a hip roof on that end of the house. It'll be a gable roof, so there won't be a gutter on that side, actually. All the watershed will be on the eave sides.
Okay. So the front and the back.
The front and the back,
South,
correct.
right, the front and the back,
So
all right.
it may be drawn that way, but we can certainly do it so that that's not an issue. And the neighbor has been notified, and they're cool with it.
Okay. Thank you.
So, all right.
Any other comments from the audience?
You want to open up the public hearing?
Oh, yeah, that's right, public hearing. Sorry, forgot about that one. Any other questions for the director before we get started? Okay, now I will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this project is urged to step forward. We'll ask for your name and address for the record. Public hearing is still open. For the third time, the public hearing remains open. Seeing no one wishing to speak, we'll declare the public hearing closed, and we'll bring it back to the commissioners for action. Commissioners?
Move approval for the conditional use permit.
With the conditions outlined by staff?
Correct.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Alderperson Kneebone. Discussion there. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 7 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from Mark Lewandowski, representing Ascension, Wisconsin Spirit Medical Transportation, Transport for a conditional use permit to construct a hangar at the airport, 4501 Highway 66, page 41 of your packet, Commissioners. Director.
So since the airport is zoned residential, this would be considered a conditional use, the addition of a government facility center. We've gone through this several times with previous hangars for this. What they're looking at doing here is, for Spirit, they're looking at constructing a 19,000 square foot hangar at this location that would include lodging, office, and garage space. This is a quick site plan of the hangar. To the north is pointing, or to the right is pointing up to the north. And then this would be just some quick renderings of the facility. In terms of hangars, this is actually a fairly attractive hangar with having some masonry on it, even though having still a lot of metal type siding. But typically we don't see this level of construction for hangars within the airport. Just a few more renderings of the facility and internal and potential layout for the facility. So these are the findings that we had found with regards to the conditional use, that it will increase airport use while contributing to the revenue related to the airport. The hangar itself is located next to existing hangars, and further to the south, that would be further away from residents that typically live to the northeast of the airport. So we don't feel that it would endanger the public health, safety, or morals of the public. And then the exterior architectural appeal is appropriate for the area. So we'd recommend approval with the 3 small conditions outlined in the staff report.
Okay. Any clarifying questions before I open the public hearing?
Michael, do you know what kind of current helicopter use there is at the airport, and how will this, I mean, is this going to go from 0 to
No.
whatever the
We
use is?
actually
or-
have a helicopter there
okay.
now with the medical transport.
Sure, okay.
Director, anything to add?
I don't, unless Joe does.
Director Lemke, you want to talk about? Well, so currently, the helicopter is stationed at the airport in an existing facility. They're looking at expanding and making something that's more conducive to their use.
Sure. Okay.
Any other questions before I open the public hearing?
That was fast.
Oh, you said no. I'm sorry. You said no. I didn't see you walk up there. All right,
Is there
Commissioner
an
Hartson.
issue I see in the Ascension letter that it's going to include crew quarters for 24/7, 365 operations? Is that
We have now.
a housing issue or anything? Is that?
So I'll let the director talk to that, but no, it's not. They staff it 24/7 now.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understood the question. What do you mean by housing issue?
Well, I was just wondering, is that part of a typical hangar, and is that anything?
For an operation like this, it is. We've been operating under similar environment for, are we going on 18 months maybe? Yeah. We've been.
All right, so that's
yeah,
no big
right.
concern.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. With that, then I will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this project, or step forward, name and address for the record.
My name is Jim Noonan. My address is 4809 Highway 66, Town Hall. I've lived by the airport for 40 years. Airplanes have never been a real issue for us. They don't bother us. The Sentry jet doesn't bother us. The small planes don't bother us. The only aircraft that has really been a nuisance, and I mean a serious one, is the Ascension helicopter. Now, coming into the airport, picking up a patient, taking off, not a big deal. It doesn't take real long. But these people train for long periods of time, for weeks at a time. They will be running a helicopter constantly from sometimes 10 p.m. until 11 p.m. in the summertime when windows are open. Or they'll be doing it in the middle of the day. There's considerable noise, and I think people need to be aware that this is not an intermittent use of the airport. This training goes on for long periods of time. The airport is surrounded by houses. It's not like CWA. And my concern is that the hangar will create additional use, perhaps additional training or whatever's going on over there. And certainly it projects a permanency, which means that they're not likely to leave anytime soon if they're investing all this money in the hangar. So I'm very concerned about increased use. I'm very concerned about the permanency, and I'm wondering whether there can be any discussions with Ascension about using or not using the airport to the extent they do currently for training or other ancillary uses of those aircraft.
Okay, thank you. Public hearing is still open.
Alyssa Fensel, 223 Green Avenue North. I live on the west end of the airport. I'm familiar with Ascension's operations. I work with Marshfield Clinic as a registered nurse. I agree that the helicopter is important, but looking at the plans, I see room for a fixed wing craft plus another helicopter. So this increased use, I do have to wonder. I mean, I hear the helicopter going a lot. I know they are busy, but it's still a very large source of noise pollution, particularly the helicopters. So I want to echo his concern. does need to be thought about, especially for the training concerns. Maybe establishing some quiet hours for the neighborhoods when it respect to the training itself. Obviously, it's not appropriate to request that for an emergency situation.
Right.
But I do want to lend some support to that while supporting the need for the facility as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Public hearing remains open. Yes, sir?
Thank you. PJ Monday for Ascension Spirit Medical Transport, address 3500 Ministry Parkway, Weston. We're definitely listening to your concerns. That's why the proposal is where it is. Initially, we were way down on Highway 66, closer to residential areas, but that has been worked out with the airport, where this feels like this is a better source, where it's going to be closer to the freeway and further away from the residential areas. As regard to the training, yes, that we do train on the helicopter, so we're ready for emergency situations. There's a lot of maintenance that also involves the helicopter. However, when we do have the hangar built, it'll be in front of the hangar, and hopefully that will shield and kind of deflect some of the noise back out towards the freeway. Again, that's why we were really looking at this as our #1 option of having it way down on that end. And again, yes, helicopters are a lot noisier. There will only be one helicopter there, and eventually an airplane to do medical transports as well. And that's, we do try to fly, as much as we can, not right over residential areas. And we will be doing that, with the new landing, with the helicopter down in that area.
Thank you. Public hearing is still open. Public hearing remains open. And for the third time, the public hearing is still open. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed, and we will move back to the commission for discussion. Director Lemke, anything to add, seeing as the airport is under your jurisdiction?
From a planning perspective, everything's been going great. Mentioned that the facility was talked about in some different locations, and the current location is probably the best suited for any sort of noise abatement. But I'd also point out that a project that we have going on for hangar design with the Bureau of Aeronautics extends that same area for future hangars. So they're also building in the area where any future commercial hangars would go. It does complement the use of the site quite a bit because of the fact that they're not in the ramp area up here, which currently they're operating out of our community hangar. So it does actually complement that use a lot, and the fact that we're not going to prevent them from getting out, and they're not going to prevent us from taking other traffic. The Stevens Point Airport, I'm sure you've all heard the little presentation a time or two, but it's the third largest general aviation airport in the state, which accounts for no scheduled traffic, right? So we have a busy little airport, and we're happy that it is. And in the same breath, we want to be as sensitive as we can be to the neighbors and all the other users. So we'll do what we can to make sure everybody's heard and talk amongst us, all of the stakeholders, and address the concerns where we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Alderperson Nebon.
I'm not sure who might answer this. Could there, when you're working on an aircraft or a helicopter, you're not going to be running it up inside a hangar. Could there be any kind of baffling on the outside that might help with the sound when it's out of the hangar? I don't know if that would be something, or a little screening on the other side to maybe give a buffer?
I think the mention of avoiding things as much as they can is a good first step. I mean, right in our assurances and everything, as a municipality who has a municipal airport, we talk about not impeding the use of the municipal airport and doing things like smart growth and things like that. And so I think that would speak a little bit to the contrary, to say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that, because that's kind of putting a bit of a damper on things that are possible to do at an airport when the intended use is to fly things, right? So again, that doesn't take away the sensitivity to things, right? It's not going to take away the fact that we're going to listen, we're going to work with our neighbors where we can, and all of that.
Thank you. Air Force, right?
Yes, I was going to say, I lived on an Air Force base and was an aircraft mechanic, so in my mind, the sound is rather comforting. I live on the other side, the south side of the airport, beyond the trees, so I don't get a lot of the noise, but whenever a helicopter goes up, I go out and look to see who it is, because I'm curious, but.
Well, and the fact that we're able to house the Spirit helicopter here, I think is a big plus for the citizens. Being in a central location, we can get out emergency services as soon as we need to. I know the training needs to happen, day flights, night flights, all different sorts of conditions, but I know we also need to be as respectful as possible to the neighbors. So with that, I will move approval of the conditional use request for Mark Lewandowski, representing Ascension, Wisconsin Medical Transport, with the conditions outlined in the staff report.
I'll second.
Seconded by Alderperson Kneebone. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 8 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from Christopher Petrusky to amend the City of Stevens Point Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Map, Map 8.3, for the purposes of amending the future land use designation from residential to commercial/office/multifamily at 800 Whiting Avenue, page 56 of your packet, Commissioners. Director.
So these two items go together. One is a request to amend the future land use map with the comprehensive plan relating to the future land use designation. And then the next item would be, subsequently, would be a rezoning for a multifamily type use for these two properties. Now, this property is right off of Whiting Avenue. To the south of it is Ruth Guilford Center. To the north of it is multifamily apartments, and then to the west of it is manufacturing type uses. So the property currently is identified as residential within our comprehensive plan. Likely this was put on it because that was the existing use at the time back in 2005, 2006, when probably should have been a more appropriate type of use would have been either a multifamily or a commercial type use on that property, given the surrounding uses of the property. Right now, it's currently zoned R2, which is a single-family residence district, which would allow single-family type uses and a limited number of other uses. So in order for the property to be rezoned, the rezoning must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Right now, it is identified as single or two-family residential, so rezoning to multifamily would be inconsistent with that plan. So therefore, the request to change this future land use map designation, you can see this yellow couple parcels in a sea of orange. Purple is industry, and then blue is institutional and government. And this is the current zoning of the property, R2 single family, and then multifamily surrounding it, and then manufacturing to the west, and then single family with the institutional and municipal use to the south. And just quickly kind of outlining the uses surrounding the property. So looking at it, given the surrounding uses of the property and kind of the intent of the general area, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to this area remain residential. While the owner doesn't have any specific plans in mind of what the property will become, his intent is to sell the property, and rezoning it to a multifamily use would probably be a better fit for that property. So with these two items, we'd be looking at, one, changing the future land use designation to a multifamily office commercial land use designation, and then subsequently moving forward with the rezoning request to an R4 multiple family 1 zoning classification to be consistent with the surrounding properties in the general area.
Okay. Any questions for the director before we open the public hearing? Okay. With that, I will declare the public hearing open. Ma'am, step forward to the lectern. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Edith Pankowski. I live in 2331 Aspen Lane, Plover. However, I am the owner of 808 Whiting Avenue, which is the apartment complex which completely surrounds the property in question. And I really have a question concerning the commercial rezoning, because all of the properties along Whiting Avenue that have been built in the last 20 years have been residential, multiple apartments. There's some very, very nice apartments down further on Whiting, and I guess I consider mine fairly nice also. And I'm really concerned about adding commercial to that property, which might allow like a gas station, some type of filling, stations like this with 24/7 lights or loud noises. And I can't imagine any of the residential properties now existing on Whiting Avenue or those further down would find that at all appropriate. So I find that inappropriate for this area. I think the R4 would be much more appropriate. I have some concerns about it only from a personal point of view, and I guess I can raise those now, or you want me to wait until we get to the next one?
Whichever you choose.
Okay, well, I have some concerns on that. We have developed a number of properties in Stevens Point, including 808 Whiting Avenue, which required rezoning at the time. And at the time we did that, we were required to submit a certified survey map, site plan, and a drainage map for the area. And I would hope that the committee would consider that in the rezoning here. I'm particularly concerned about several things. We had our property certified when we built it, and a number of the stakes have unfortunately disappeared. So we don't know exactly where they are. We had some concern a few years ago with the Adjourney property cutting trees which belonged in our property. And I have some concerns right now with the little kind of V-shape or that little kind of triangle we have with a construction company right now using that property. A lot of people don't really think it's ours, but it is ours. And so I have to be really concerned about encroachment on my property. But of most concern, I'm concerned about drainage, because I own the property surrounding that property on 3 sides with the city road on the 4th side. And I know when we built our property, we had to submit a very extensive drainage plan. And I would hope that you would take that into consideration here, because I'm concerned about the drainage of that property. And if and or when something would be built there, I think drainage is a real concern. So I guess that's my concern on the second part of this. But I really am concerned about the addition of commercial, in that the R4 is not an issue with me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Public hearing is still open. We'll, actually, Bernice will start in the back. That gentleman had his hand up first.
Sorry.
Then we'll get to you.
Christopher Piotrowski, 800 Whiting Avenue, Stevens Point. The reason why this property, I purchased this property in March of 1985. I was only 21 years old. The old highway department was still there at that time. They didn't even build their new building yet. Had the railroad going into the Coke Petroleum area and this and that. So at one time, my future was thinking to put a building on there for my business. My dad owned Eagle Plumbing and Heating at one time. Eventually, he was going to get old, and plans have changed. That was back in the 90s. Now, my wife works at King. She used to work at one of the paper mills. So she, driving about 38 miles one way, so we bought property in Iola, Wisconsin, and about another, either this fall or next spring, we will be moving into that property. So this property here, as far as development of residential, it's not really appealing when you're next to M2 heavy industrial. Don't wrong, we all brought our properties there knowing that Ed Russin owned that. Now, in 2007, 2008, we were approached by a lawyer for some investors, me and Ed. They wanted to buy 2.5 acres from this point here all the way up to the Star Brewery Park. And they wanted to buy me out, and I don't know if they talked to Edith or not. I don't know what they wanted to do. I think they wanted to build apartments. It could very well be the investment group that's just behind us, a little farther down Whiting Avenue. I don't know. It was a lawyer for some investors. That was in '07. I didn't have the second property bought yet with the house on, so at that time we were kind of in the middle of a dead space. This house, originally when I bought it from Norm Johnson Asphalt Products. It was their office building, so at one time it was commercial. Then it must have got changed when I bought it. They must have had a zoning change on it. Phyllis Stege handled it for Century 21 so many years ago, but and then we modeled it back into a home. So pretty much what we're looking for is by changing it, it's more appealing for either duplexes or fourplexes or whatever. If somebody wants to develop, I mean, I don't have a problem if she doesn't want to see commercial there. There was at one time, and I don't disagree with her. It depends what type of commercial it'd be. I mean, you got the Ruth Gilfrey across there. At one time, I did try to get a hold of Mary Patoka. I talked to somebody just down the line. I had offered it to Cap Services. when they got shot down over by the old Woodward Governor. And I said, well, that'd be a pretty good place to put this. This is a pretty good location, right, with the roof gill-free and several other, this is centrally located, so this is pretty prime property. I mean, you guys are talking down the street, like Soik property and stuff. Some of this property is getting developed now. I mean, this house was probably built in the 50s. I remodeled the inside on it. I put new windows in 07. I put new roof on it in 09. But I'm not really going to go any farther than that because they're probably going to tear it down, whoever buys it. So it's mostly just to enhance that area and upgrade it. And this way here, selling it as residential, I probably won't get as much money because of the location. But if somebody wants to buy it to develop it for duplexes or something, I think it would produce more money. So I hope I get your blessing. Thank you.
Thank you. Bernice?
Bernice Savanick, 1017 Jasmine Lane, North Stevens Point. My question is, what is the parking difference between R4 and commercial? As I remember from the past, commercial, you could have parking right out in front, right off the street. And R4, I think, would be more like a residential. So that question's for Mike, if he can answer that.
Okay, is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, that's,
we're in the
it was
public
just
hearing
how.
phase. We're in the public hearing phase. That's okay. We'll get the director to answer your questions after that, but I just wanted to make sure you had anything else to.
No, that's all. I can see where, this is a problem thing, and those things have happened in the past, and you're trying to rectify or change them now. But my question was about the parking mainly, because as I recall from the past, but I'll let Mike Kostrowski answer that.
We'll get someone to speak to that after the public hearing. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. And for the third time, the public hearing remains open. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commission. Director, or Kyle?
So there were a few questions in regards to having a CSM drainage and site plan done. That would come forward when there was an actual project in front of you, so that would be reviewed. When there's an actual project, they would be allowed to continue their existing use on the property as single family, but if they'd come forward with a multiple family type development, we would be reviewing that as a conditional use at this point in time. With the future land use designation, one could look at doing this as a multifamily future land use designation that would allow 3+ units. The rezoning to R4 in the next agenda item would not allow any commercial type use. That would be strictly multifamily, so we wouldn't need to worry about any commercial type use on this property with the zoning classification. The challenging thing here is that you deal with two different, one, a future land use classification and what this land should be utilized in the future with versus what the existing zoning is today and what zoning classification we'd put on it. So an appropriate future land use would be a multifamily 3+ units, and then subsequently rezoning to R4 would allow the individual to proceed with selling the property with intent for multifamily to be located on that lot. With a parking situation, the zoning classification would determine what the parking would be for setbacks. R4 has a pretty deep setback for street yard parking on the property. Again, that would be reviewed in front of you when you came for a conditional use on the multifamily.
Thank you for touching on that, Director, too, because I think that addresses some of Edith's concerns. The next agenda item, item number 9, is a request for rezoning to R4, which you said you would be okay with. So that's ultimately what the goal is here. So hopefully that answers it. And Ms. Savanick, again, thank you very much for your service to the city of Stevens Point.
No, I thank you for answering the question.
Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So, because we first need to do number 8
Yes.
before we can narrow
Right.
it down to number 9.
We need to change the
correct?
future land use
Okay.
map. And as the director mentioned, we would recommend the multifamily 3+ units as the future land use designation. Once that is approved, then we would consider the next item, which would be rezoning to R4 multifamily, not commercial. Okay?
Well, I will move approval of the request for, to amend this comprehensive plan, future land use map for the purposes of amending the future land use designation from residential to commercial office multifamily at 800 Whiting Avenue with the parcel numbers and staff recommendations.
Specifically to the multifamily 3+ units?
Yes.
Thank you. Is Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rice. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 9 is a public hearing and action on a request from Christopher Petrusky to rezone 800 Whiting Avenue from R2 Single Family Residential District to R4 Multifamily 1 Residential District, page 56 of your packet. Director, anything to add? I think we kind of covered everything. This is just the next step, asking for the rezoning. So with that, I will declare the public hearing open on this item. Anyone wishing to offer testimony, step forward, name and address for the record, please. Public hearing is still open. For the third time, the public hearing remains open. I know it sounds awkward, so I'll explain it again. We're required to ask 3 times, and that's why we do it. Sometimes it gets a little weird, but that's why we do it. Seeing no one after asking 3 times wishing to speak for the public hearing, I will declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commission for action. Commissioners.
I move approval to rezone 800 Whiting Ave from R2 Single Family to R4 as outlined.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Arnson. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 10 is a public hearing and action on a request from Don Scafidi for a conditional use permit to construct another building on the lot for vehicular automobile repair within the Wellhead Protection B District at 3733 Stanley Street, page 68 of your packet. Director.
So this is dealing with Scafidi Motors, looking at constructing a new auto repair shop facility on the southeast side of the site. The use of auto repair, auto sales is a permitted use within the B4 district, which this property is zoned. However, because this property falls within a protection zone B, auto repair, oil changing type facilities require a conditional use permit. In reviewing this request initially, we didn't have all of the information before making a recommendation, so therefore we put some stricter conditions on the use, not knowing what types of quantities that we would have. Since then, we've been able to gather that information, so our recommendation will change a little bit at the end here, just because the intensity of this use is really not that intense as once may have thought it would be. So this is the site that we're looking at. This is the southeast side of the site. The existing facility is just to the west of it. Internal use of the site. The property is about 8 acres in size. The building they'd be looking at constructing is just a little bit over 20,000 square feet. And again, used for automobile body repair and painting type facility. So the paint used for the facility is going to be water-based type paint, and in terms of the size of the quantity of the materials on site, they're going to be in single gallons, so which is a fairly small quantity containers at this site, so that doesn't typically rise to the level of the containment that we'd like to see with other types of facilities that may have 50-gallon drums or something like that, where a spill on site could have a detrimental impact, whereas a single gallon would typically not. Furthermore, they wouldn't be doing any rust proofing or undercoating at the facility, so that eliminates that concern. So with that being said, again, it's a very low intensity use. They did receive a conditional use permit, I believe it was about a couple years ago, for the oil changing facility on the site. These conditions would be fairly similar to that facility, except for the few that are on the second page here. For item 8 that was in your, condition number 8 that was in your packet, we would strike that and put that in the event that a significant change occurs to the chemicals quantity, storage, or service at the facility or on the property, our department and the utility department shall be notified, which may trigger review of the conditional use permit and the establishment of new conditions, just in case there's additional quantities that are on the site. And then in terms of the expiration, we would just review it after every 2 years to make sure nothing has changed or no other concerns that we have. So other than that, we really don't have many concerns with this type of use. I feel it'll be a good addition to the area, and with just it being a very low intense use, it doesn't really rise to that level.
Okay. Commissioners, on page 69 of your packet, I want to point out that in the map, there is no hangar being constructed on this site. It was just carried over. Any clarifying questions before I open the public hearing? Alder?
I don't, to my knowledge, the city hasn't had any problems with any kind of hazardous spills at Scafidi in the past, have there been?
Not that I'm aware of.
Just knocking on wood there. No, it's been very successful. Okay, with that, I'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony, step forward. Please.
I'll repeat. My name's Alyssa Fensel. I live at 223 Green Avenue North. I'm kitty corner to Scafidi. Would you be willing to bring up the map again for me so I can point out some things?
Sure.
Okay, so this is my property here, just for reference, and this is where they want to put the building. Right now, I enjoy a nice park-like view from my home. I'm concerned about my property value. I'm also concerned about drainage. While I recognize this was an exceptional winter as far as snowfall, we had significant drainage concerns in our neighborhood, in our area. I was one of the fortunate few that escaped without a flooded basement. Currently, they do all their snow gets piled up right here. If we put a building here, where is the snow gonna go? What are they gonna do with all that extra snow? They're also talking about putting asphalt across all that area. That's also adding to the drainage concern, because in our neighborhood, we've had a lot of growth with apartment complexes, which has added to that. The storm sewer system is not keeping up with it. I had a large amount of flooding in my driveway. My driveway was a complete ice skating rink. I actually got stuck. I couldn't even get out of my property multiple times this winter, despite having plow service. So, putting up a fence, that's not gonna shield my property from that. Also, the exhaust from paint booths. I used to work for a car dealership. It's not exactly non-odoriferous. It's stinky. That's not something I wanted when I bought my house there. And then there's lighting at night. Scafidi, in interest of being conserving electricity and energy, which I applaud, has put in LED lights in their parking lot. Great, low energy, but significant blue light. Those trees block it. If they're gone, now I have to deal with that at night at my home as well. So these are things I would appreciate that the commission keep in consideration when considering to approve this. While I agree we do need expanding business in the town, we also need to protect the residents around. I'm a parent with small children. This is a concern for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. Yes, sir.
Joel Brightsman, General Manager, Scafidi Motors, 3733 Stanley Street. We do recognize that those trees have been on that lot for a long time. When we built on the service department in this area, we were very concerned about that also. We wanted to screen off the apartments from seeing the backside of the building. So we are trying to leave as many trees as possible. Most of those are jack pine in there, so we're not exactly sure till we get in there exactly how much screening we can do, but our desire is to leave screening of trees between the residential area and our facility. As far as the water is concerned, we do have a substantial retaining pond in the back, and we would be draining all that water to the rear of that. That pond is rarely have over a foot or 2 foot of water in it, so it's our feeling that there's plenty of opportunity there to take on any water that would be have to drain off that property.
Okay, thank you. Public hearing remains open. Bernice?
Can I ask?
Bernice, I need you to come to the microphone, please.
But I'm not public hearing probably. I don't know.
The reason we have the microphone up here, Bernice, is so when they hear us on the radio and TV, they can pick up your voice.
I still have a mother's voice. Hear me 2 blocks away. Anyhow, Scafidi's has been very nice in taking care of their properties and that. And, but I'm wondering if this lady that was up here realizes that all these car dealerships and that have these lights on constantly because of the bad things that are going on in the world, and so there's a lot less of it. So that's why they have it on, and they're trying to cut their costs too by changing the lighting, just like the city changed some of their lighting in the city years ago to cut costs. So, and she's the only neighborhood person that came forth, or was anything sent out to the other neighbors of Scaffidi's voters? About
Yes.
this expansion?
So when we set that out, we do notify the neighbors, yes.
Okay, and nobody else?
I don't know yet.
Okay. That's all I wanted to ask.
Thank you.
You know.
Public hearing remains open. If you need to, sure.
I do recognize the need for lighting. I just wanted to make that clear to her. Like I said, I worked at a car dealership, but that's still light pollution and needs to be addressed for the people living around it. Yes, we need to take care of, I don't want to see theft there. It sucks, it's expensive, it's all the way around, it's bad. But this also, like I said, I want to see them grow their business, but I also have to protect my interest in my property. Most of the neighbors are not single, it's mostly surrounded by an apartment complex. Is the apartment complex owner really going to be concerned about coming here for this meeting? No, because there's a vast need for apartments, and if somebody moves out, there's going to be another person moving in. I can't attest to the rest of my neighbors because based on the map, the only people who were included was my property, this is currently used for parking, and this person. The rest of it is, there's only a couple of us, so that I'm the only person here, that's not surprising. Not very many people were invited. So, thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open.
Because I know someone that lives further down the Kennedy.
Public hearing is still open. For the third time, the public hearing remains open. Okay, with that, seeing no one else wishing to testify, I will declare the public hearing closed, and we will bring it back to the commission for action. A couple of things. Director, can you tell me the radius of the notifications that went out?
So the radius of the notifications is 200 feet.
And that's standard?
That's standard. Typically under state law, it's 100 feet for objecting individuals. So we do double of what the state would require. The only other thing I'd like to point out is that this is a conditional use for 2 points, an additional building on a lot, as well as the wellhead protection standpoint. The car dealership is a permitted use. The lighting that goes along with it, the screening, they would still have to meet all standard zoning requirements. However, the conditions placed upon the property owner here for this type of use should relate to either an additional building on a lot or the wellhead protection, not just standard conditions for additional landscaping or something else that would not be germane to the protection of, let's say, the groundwater supply or a second building on a lot. So that's the one thing we need to keep in consideration. While I do understand the concern with the lights, under our conditional use standards, we would have to stay with those standards.
Okay. I would like to ask the applicants to come up and, if they can, address what facilities would be in place to mitigate the odors, should anything come out. I know there's a filtration system. We could talk about that a little bit. And how receptive you would be. I know you said there were jack pines, but adding some additional screening, maybe to help contain all the activities that are going on that site. Please.
Did you want name again?
No, I think that's okay.
First of all, as far as odors, we are presently utilizing 2 facilities, one at across the street at the truck center with a paint booth that's about close to 25 years old. And we're also renting a facility at the old Courtesy Motors. Again, about the same age booth, about 25 years old. Both of those are inadequate to convert to water-based paint because you need a lot of airflow for water-based paint. We'll be able to convert entirely, and we'll be able to reduce from 2 paint banks, one for each paint booth, down to single. So we should be able to cut the quantity, first of all, in half, and the second of all, taking all paint from solvent-based paint over to water-based paint, which would reduce that odor to very, very significantly. There's still a solvent in both the primer and a clear coat, but that's much reduced. The most quantity is the paint. What was the other question?
The other one is, even though it's not required at this point, are you open to adding some additional screening? If you're going to take out some trees, are you able to put some things back to help screen the neighbors from the facility?
Our desire would be trees versus a fence. We don't like the ugliness of a fence either. I know Don Scafidi would very much rather have trees. And like I say, we're not quite sure. There is some mixed hardwood in there, but we're not sure if it's in quite the adequate to completely screen, but we would be open to adding something, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, commissioners? Hopefully, I think at least some of that should address some of the concerns that people around the area would have. I don't know if it completely answers everything, but again, the conditional use that we're talking about is basically our oversight for the wellhead protection and adding an additional building to a pre-existing permitted use.
So I guess I have one question that would be related to adding the building and presumably additional kind of parking facilities. The size of that retention pond, does that have to be effectively recalculated given the increased impervious surface?
Yes, they would have to meet those requirements.
Okay.
And I know this winter was rough because we got a big amount of rain and a warm day when the ground was still frozen, so it effectively stopped any saturation. So it was all just running wherever it went. Hopefully that doesn't happen anymore, but it's Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We'll likely have something like that happen next year. Commissioners, any other thoughts or questions or a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit, subject to condition by staff.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rice. Any further discussion? Hearing none, and I'd like to note just once again that the applicant has agreed to work within the screening, to add additional screening for trees if necessary. It's not a condition of the conditional use, but it is noted. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 11 is a public hearing and action on a request from Stevens Point Housing LLC at 111 Division Street North for a couple of things. They start on page 85 of your packet, Commissioners. To amend the plans for the Planned Development Zoning District and to amend the conditional use permit for multiple buildings on a lot, reduce setbacks within the BTID 5 district and multiple family dwelling units. Director.
All right, so this relates to the project on the former Kmart site at 111 Division Street. The applicant has revised the plans fairly significantly, and with that revisement, does require the Plan Commission to reconsider them to make a recommendation to the Common Council for their approval. With this site, the applicant is looking at putting in 113 units with 441 beds within one facility. If you may recall, there were two separate buildings the last time we had reviewed this. They'd also look at doing a total of about 17,000 square feet of commercial space within two separate facilities as opposed to one larger one. The existing Kmart building would be demolished. Several amenities within the apartments, including high-speed internet, study rooms, social lounges, and so forth, and then a 24-hour on-site management proposed for the site as well. The planned district development, as you may recall, provides flexibility within zoning requirements as opposed to looking at every single lot individually, every single building individually. We look at it more from a comprehensive standpoint to make sure that the development flows together, and ultimately we get a better product with that. However, with that, sometimes there are certain deviations that would come out during that process that would allow the development to proceed. So this is these are the new renderings of the site. Again, it's a single building built in two phases, and I'll go through the slides and kind of show you the progression of those different phases. But exterior materials, looking at a masonry veneer, synthetic fiber cement board panels. This is a aerial kind of view of the rendering. Isidore Street, if you recall, used to go through the site and kind of went all the way to the north end of the site. That became a little problematic for it being a student housing facility in terms of creating a more secure type campus for the structure, as well as a single point of entry for students. With the prior two-building design, you had two separate points of entry, common areas, exercise rooms. That became also problematic because you may have had to gone outside from one building to the other if those amenities were not within the building. With this design, they're able to house them in this common area along at the termination of Isidore Street for both phases to use. What they also have done is provided this pedestrian corridor going on the what would be the western side of the site all the way through to the northern end where there's future development paths located as well. And then looking at doing two retail buildings that would complement the design of the main structure out front a little bit closer to Division Street. One change here is that they did push these buildings closer to the street and dropped a stall of parking and added that to the rear of the building. Also, by breaking the buildings up into two, does provide for additional visibility or drive-through facilities that could take place within the facility, thus increasing potential for leasing of the building at a quicker pace. This is the site plan overview of the site. As I mentioned, two different phases. Phase one would be the orange, which would include the about 220 units, as well as the common amenities portion of the building. Nearing completion of phase one, they'd automatically start then on phase two to add an additional about 220 units within the facility, and then look at constructing the retail components when they reach a certain rental agreement and tenancy for those two spaces. This is just fire access around the building, does provide good access for fire-related response. And then the landscaping plan, very heavily landscaped. One of the nice things about this design is the courtyard type area, a lot of green space within the middle. You'll notice that the square footage of the building went up, but the overall impervious coverage on the site went down. So they were able to utilize a lot more green area as opposed to having that access drive going through the center of the site. And a few shots of the exterior renderings of the apartment buildings. And then, again, complementing retail. The one nice thing about this as well is that almost all sides of the building look finished and like they can have a tenant space. While they may not have direct access, let's say, to the rear of the buildings kind of do complement the front end of the building, so you don't really necessarily see a backside of a building. And just some amenities that they're looking at on the site. So this is the proposed design specifications, and then the previous design, again, as they eliminated that internal access drive to the site, creating a more complete campus, but still keeping that pedestrian corridor to the west of the site between the retail. And this is just a comparison summary between the two. On the left here, you'll see the proposed project, and then on the right here, you'll see the previous proposal. With this site, they'd be adding about 20 additional beds and a little bit more parking for the site as well. And again, as the total coverage, total building space went up, the total impervious surface coverage of the site did go down. And, you know, one of the things that we would ask, and we had been contacted by an adjacent property owner, is the flexibility for staff to work with the developer and the adjacent property owners, maybe to reconfigure some of the parking potentially if that can be made. This building, you know, with the Kmart being there, utilized a lot of parking within that facility, and a lot of that will be lost. As you can see here, there's potentially for 6 parallel spots, possibly pushing that a little bit further to the west here to allow perpendicular parking, which would gain a sizable number of additional parking spaces as we work through that. So we would just ask for that additional flexibility through this process. If that comes to fruition, that we would have that ability to do so. So, other than that, we would recommend approval with the staff outlined conditions.
Okay, any questions for the director before I open the public hearing? Okay, we'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony, step forward. Mr. Lobbs, go ahead.
My name is Jim Lobbs, and I live at 1026 2nd Street North, and I'm up here to discuss what he had just talked about, where we hopefully might be able to have some sharing parking in the back of my building. I had communicated with Mr. Graff about a year ago when the original plan was presented, and he had positively indicated to me that there would be a possibility that he would give me an easement for that purpose. And essentially, we've come up with a plan right now, and it would be, what the plan would amount to is in the adjoining space, maybe I could point to it, which is right here, essentially, without taking anything off of his property, we would be able to still accommodate the 6 parking places which he has planned there. And I know that Mr. Graff has been busy, and hopefully he will agree with me to do that. The other thing is that the plan that's presented doesn't show a drive-through in the back of my building. Because right now, if you could go to a picture of my building, where it's showing my building is one of the first pictures, right there. Okay, essentially, right now, we do have a drive here. And so essentially, we need that, of course, for through traffic, et cetera, or, in getting in and out of this area. So hopefully, we'll have a positive meeting with Mr. Graff, and I don't want to put him in a corner, but in other words, I just want to mention that we've been talking about that. And so I was on this about a year ago, but now the plans have changed, and so hopefully we'll welcome Mr. Graff as a good neighbor, and appreciate the money that he is investing in the city and so on. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing is still open. It's in Alder Nabel.
Thank you, Commission. Cindy Nabel, District 3, 1100 Phillips Street. I just have a concern still about the parking. The number of beds, I'm trying to see if I'm getting this correct, are now 221 total for both buildings. And if that's true, then it shows 239 total parking, which means that's not per bed, that's per unit, I'm assuming. I'm not quite sure how to look at this, but it still looks like we don't have much in parking, and that's always been an issue, specifically in this area of campus area. We've already have so many issues with not having parking for houses that have been turned into duplexes and other things, that it concerns me that we already don't have enough parking. We could say that we can use the parking downtown if someone wants to use that, but we're already looking at that for the development we're doing downtown, so we can't keep looking at those empty parking lots that we have downtown as an option. Where else do we have any contingency for additional parking when it's needed? When this first came back quite a few years ago on Division Street, when the hotel was going to be bought and redone into apartment complexes, the same issue was brought up, and I found out afterwards that the city had some ideas of where they could probably put additional parking if needed in that area. So I'm wondering, are we going to have something that will be able to be used for people to have to, even if they have to walk across the roadway, but across Division to get to it? It's not optimal to think that only one car is going to be per unit. With family, friends, other people coming, they're going to need spots too. So I just would hope that we address that. The other thing that I'm not so concerned about, the less amount of green space for hiding the parking area, but I'm wondering about the 5-bed units again. Again, most apartments, that's a lot of people in one apartment of adults. And so 5-bed units, I would have hoped they would maybe had 4 at the maximum, but it seems like we have an awful lot of the 5-bed units, and that's, I think students would be better off in a house than they are in these. It just, I have some concerns about some of this. The parking is my number one thing that definitely makes a difference. It's a tough to find a spot to park over in the coffee area and the ice cream place over there as it is when you go in the afternoons. So I just want to make sure we're not going to add to the increased problems we already have in that area. It is an extreme problem that's been there for years. Excuse me, and the city still and the university has not addressed that issue. Although we have lost some number of students, we still have a lot of people that do transfer in and out of the city constantly. And we have not come up with a park and ride or anything else or other spots for people to be able to park so we can help adjust that. And it was talked about doing that back in the master plan for the university back in 2008, and I've not seen anything happen yet on that. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing is still open.
I would like to double what she said.
Sorry, Bernice, name and address again, please.
Bernice Sevenick, 1017 Jasmine Lane. I agree with what Cindy, I think it is, just said. That was my concern too for Mr. Lobbs, because with this new setup, it's much nicer, and I think it's more attractive to the residents and that. But do you have, will there be parking for visitors? How will delivery trucks, is there enough room in the front of those buildings, that strip mall that's going to be there for a delivery truck? Because there isn't very much room in the back there. And if someone's in a parking space and your truck is trying to do his thing there, how is that car going to get out of that parking space probably? You know, it may not happen at all, but I did see something like that at the Y recently, where a bus was parked right by all handicap parking, and nobody could get out, and they were trying to. But anyhow, I do agree with that. Parking has always been a problem in the central part of that area, and a few years ago, the university actually put in a surface parking in an area that they were told not to years before. And so, you know, what are you going to do? And a lot of people do walk. People are supposed to be biking and using all the bike paths and that, but will they really do it? I don't know. And people like me have to drive. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Public hearing remains open. Alder Short.
David Shore, 2nd District Alder, on this question of parking. From everything that I understand and have read, the next generation is driving markedly, dramatically less than any previous generation. There's been a big drop, a bigger drop from one generation to the next. And here we're talking about housing that is especially convenient. So I would think that between the target customer or target resident and the location, that both of those would cut against so much of a parking need. And I mean, I guess I'll, of course, be interested in hearing from the developer. I think probably as a general rule, they, have done some calculation and maybe even, based it on experience with other properties.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Melissa Johnson, District 5, Council President. I understand the concerns about parking. However, if I recall correctly, there's still Lot J, Lot Q, not Q, what is it? Yeah, Q, where students, everyone's making the assumption that we have to have parking right where we are. And I think that's a false assumption. There are other parking options. They're just not right at your door. Now, as Ms. Sevenick said, someone like her with some mobility issues would probably want to have adjacency. However, young, youthful, hale and hearty students could probably walk, because my granddaughter was in the dorm across the street, and because she worked out at Dairy Queen, she kept a car on campus, and that was Lot X, so she had to walk all the way over. So I think we're making some assumptions about the need for adjacency in parking when there are other options, and it does include, you know, buying a parking permit from the university. So that's my take on it.
Thank you. Alder Jennings?
Alder Jennings, Alder District 1, parking. Again, the only way we're going to change the culture of over parking and induced demand in this community is to change planning and the way we design. And we have way too much parking. And the only way we're going to change behavior is to change design. And I am grateful that Director Ostrowski and his team and the city staff and council are working together to change that. I don't want to speak for Alder Nabel at all, but I think you're also emphasizing that as we cut the excess amount of parking we have, as we cut parking down, we need to also be creating other spaces, whether that's satellite parking, better park and, or not better, we don't have any park and ride, creating park and ride sites, better bus transport, these kinds of things. And I agree with that, and I advocate for that, but I think we have too much parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for the public hearing? Okay, Alder Morrow. Then we'll have Alder Nabel up again. We'll get all the council in here.
All
Save us time in 2
District
weeks.
11. This development's in my area. One, I'm very happy for this to be here, since trying to get reused space of this size, it's very, very hard. We also still have the old Cops building. We have the old Walmart as well. And I know that the student enrollment is down, but from this being here, I think this shows that at some point the school is going to rebound. Parking is an issue. If you go to any college town, parking's an issue. It's been, if you go to UW-Madison, Stout, Eau Claire, I mean, this is an issue. I know, I'm glad that the fellow alders and the developers are also looking at this as well. I mean, there are other lots that are available, and at several schools as well. Students, their first year, are not able to have a car on the campus. So that might end up being an issue. I know my son's at college now. He can't have a car his first year, and he has to walk. He's 19 years old and he's able to walk. And he's looking forward to the next few years so he's able to have a car. But also, he's very close, and just like at most colleges, I mean, students could walk over to their classes. It's not that far away. But I'm just very happy that this development is here, and I think this is going to be a real asset to our area. But I am looking forward to seeing what some of the parking challenges are going to be and what some of the solutions are going to be as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Nabel.
Alder Nabel, District 3, 1100 Phillips Street. And I also want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak one more time. just as mentioned, I am thrilled this is happening. I think it's good we're having this new building and repurposing an area that would just be another blight. So I'm not against this at all, and I'm not against having less parking on this area. But what I do want to make sure is that exactly what Alder Sean Moore just said, was that we're looking at what can we do as we see the problems, what can we do to fix some of them. One of them that I really feel strongly about is we have already, students can walk to everything very easily, but if you look in our neighborhoods, we see parking lots in the whole backyards. And so we need to get at that to address it so that it isn't, because right now what I see in my area for 39 years is friends now parking in people's backyards, not just the people that live there. And so they have now found their solution of not having to pay for parking by just making it bigger and bigger. And we do have to really address that, and we have to enforce. Otherwise, all we're doing is adding to this area even more expansion of the yards, because friends let friends park. That's just what they do. So I would like to see that we're looking at that. And the university back in 2008 had also agreed that if they were going to take away any of their parking lots they had, they would then come up with solutions. One was allowing, not having students drive, freshmen have cars on the university, and that would be great, because then these houses, these people that were living in these apartments would have a place to be able to put them. Right now, I don't know what the numbers are. They've always been packed in the years before. X and all the other ones have been packed with cars, with students that leave their cars there, because a lot of our students are transient. They leave on the weekends. So it's important for us to be really realistic, and I think that's my biggest issue about anything of planning that we do here is we already know what problems we've had. Doesn't mean we can't try to change the way people live. I think it's a good thing, but I also think that it takes a while. And so you can only sometimes exasperate the problems we already have unless we're going to take a stand on those issues so that we're really taking control of not having our yards become the parking lots also to do for the overflow. Thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. For the third time, the public hearing is open. Okay, seeing no one else wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Are there two things we're looking to approve here?
So, yes, both A and B. So they would be request for amending the plans for planned development zoning district and amend the conditional use permit for multiple buildings on a lot, reduce setbacks within the B-TID 5 district and multiple family dwelling units. I think we could take those all as one motion. Is that correct, Director?
Just for the record, though, parking is met, and the problems that we typically have seen do not occur on parking at complexes because of their on-site management or other professional review of it.
Commissioner?
I would move to approve the
Request as presented would be okay.
As presented, yes.
Thank you. I know it's a lot of words. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderperson Kneebone.
And that would allow the flexibility to work with the adjacent neighbor if that comes into consideration.
For the additional parking. Yes.
Yep.
For those listening on radio, that was a nod and affirmation. Is that
Yes.
agreeable to the second?
Yes, it is.
Okay. With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 12 is a public hearing and action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend Chapter 23 zoning ordinance of the revised municipal code, specifically Section 23.02, Sub 1, Sub E regarding minimum lot sizes. Page 131 of your packet. Director?
So with this request, we're looking to amend the minimum lot size for the R3 single and two-family district. Right now, within our zoning code, it's a fairly suburbanized code, and we're in the process of rewriting it and hopefully be done by this summer. But one item had been brought to our attention. Someone's actually looking at doing something similar to this and is prevented from doing so, is splitting a lot that is currently 10,000 square feet and creating two single-family lots. And they can't do so because the minimum lot size for an R3 district would require at least 8,000 square feet, which is fairly inconsistent with what we see with the existing lots within the inner core of the city. So what we wanted to do was come back more in line with what we're seeing within this district and not necessarily what we're seeing within the R2 district, which is just a standard single-family zoning district. But yet currently the lot requirements are the same within those districts. So with this request, looking at doing a couple of things for the R3 district, and I'm going to go to this real quick right here. So the current lot requirements within the R3 district require an 8,000 square foot lot, 60 foot width with 80 feet on the corner. Minimum lot size for a two-family lot would be 15,000 square feet, 100 feet for the width. Now I will also note that there is a non-conforming clause within our zoning ordinance that allows existing lots of record that are 10,000 square feet or greater to be converted into a two-family district. These would just be for new single-family lot, or new two-family lots would have to be 15,000 square feet. The proposal that we're looking at would dropping these down to from 8,000 to 5,000 square feet, 45 feet of frontage. We see a lot of lots around that 45 to 50 to 55 feet for frontage, especially within the urban core of the city. Keeping the minimum lot size for two-family consistent with our non-conforming section at 10,000 square feet, which would be double the single-family lot. And what we'd be looking at is, examples such as this. Again, this lot would not meet 16,000 square feet, so therefore couldn't be converted into two single-family homes. And you can see it's very underutilized on the eastern portion of the site. This would allow us to focus what we've been looking at on infill efforts in allowing these lots to be possibly cut in half and then putting up additional single-family homes. We have been had a severe or a significant interest in infill. We have not been expanding outward in terms of new residential subdivisions. We've been focusing on finding opportunities within the urban core to find lots available for new single-family homes. So I think this tool will, or this change will help do that. It is also consistent with what we'd be looking at in our new zoning code. Again, 5,000 square feet with 45 minimum feet of frontage. So that will be consistent with what we'd see in our new zoning code as well. We'd be looking at just fast tracking this to allow for this building season to take place to utilize this change.
Okay. Any questions for the director before I open the public hearing? Hearing none, public hearing is now declared open. If you have comments or testimony regarding this proposal, step forward, name and address for the record. We'll start with President Johnson and move to Alderperson Nabel.
I remain Melissa Johnson, District 5. Yay, thank you. I'm thrilled about this change. One of the things I ran on was affordable housing. We've got some great housing projects that I think are going to open up some opportunities for folks. My one concern after visiting a number of bigger cities is watching their downtowns, their inner cores, become gentrified with development. And I think we want to be very cautious against that because, we're a community of modest means and hardworking folks that just need affordable housing. Moving them from renting to home ownership is how they build wealth. And this, I think, is a great step towards that and sort of utilizing our urban core in a more appropriate way. So this is a great step, and I am absolutely thrilled. So thank you to our Community Development Department for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Alder Nabel.
Alder Nabel, District 3, 1100 Phillips Street. Again, I think we do need to do the infill and have single-family homes, so I'm not concerned about the single-family home, but I am concerned about the two-family home, only because there's extra cars, there's extra numbers of people usually, so there's more items that need to be stored. It just seems to me it's a little bit, we're saying 10,000 or greater to be a duplex, and we already have those, and they already are a problem, a big problem in the neighborhoods. They don't have enough space for the vehicles. So to find a way, again, that would be a whole backyard that's a parking lot. I would want to see that if it was a duplex, it still had some green space and yard area, not just about the car and the cars going in a single lane driveway. Then we have, like we already have, the people that don't want to move their car to move the other person's car out. So you have to have the angled parking this direction then as you go down, and the house is here back in. So it takes up an awful lot to be able to get that turning ratio. That's my concern. I don't mind the single family one, but I do think that reducing that could be a real problem. Is this, and I just want to know, is this only for newer development or but it's on existing lots already? So I guess I wouldn't want to see a change for the duplexing, but thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open. Alder Jennings?
Tori Jennings, Alder District 1. I think this was addressed, and I apologize. I'm just wanting to know what limits there are to prevent single-family homes from being converted to two-family, and I oppose having more homes converted to two-family rentals. So I think you already answered that, but I might have missed it. I apologize.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. Public hearing is still open. Seeing no one else wishing to testify, we will declare the public hearing closed, and we will bring it back to this body. Director, could you answer some of the questions that were brought up?
Yeah, the question regarding what prevents the conversion, under our existing zoning code, the 10,000 square feet would be the minimum as well. So this is still consistent with, you know, what we're seeing within our existing zoning code for existing lots of record. For new lots of record, however, our current code would require 15,000 square feet for a duplex. This code, or this change, would only require 10,000, which what we're seeing currently within the existing core of the city. I don't think this is out of line with, you know, what we've seen in more urbanized areas. You know, I've seen lot sizes down to 3,000 square feet for single family, very, very dense lots. This is consistent with what we've been going for. But to prevent the conversion of single family to duplexes, our existing code right now would allow such things to take place that this current, or this proposed code would be doing for existing lots of record. So there's really no change on that other than the minimum lot width.
It would be also more difficult to convert a current single-family home into a duplex as opposed to just opening it up to multiple family residents and having 5 unrelated people there. That's more of a challenge. We've already got issues to address that. But converting it to a duplex would require more investment and I think be a little more difficult to do. Was there any other? Is that it? I think we've got everybody's questions, right? Okay, commissioners?
I just had a comment about urban sprawl. The city generates a lot of property taxes from densely developed areas like our downtown core. If we can get, and I live in a twin home out behind the Holiday Inn, and we don't have excess cars. We have our 2-car garage, and our 2 cars fit in there, and even the rental unit next door doesn't have a lot of extra cars. I could live on a smaller lot. It'd be less lawn for me to mow. I've got a little garden in the backyard and plenty of green space out there. But, I mean, we could have put 3 lots, or 3 houses where we have 2, and that gives us that extra property tax to allow the city to provide more services. So I think what we can do to foster a little bit more dense development in the end is going to be a good thing, and it'll be more efficient to deliver city services. So I would move to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Arntzen. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 13 is a public hearing and action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend Chapter 23 of the zoning ordinance of the revised municipal code, specifically Section 23.01 sub 14 regarding parking lot screening. Page 134 of your packet, Commissioners. Director.
So we have certain exceptions under our zoning code where we're able to potentially waive certain elements of screening for parking lots. And we've kind of run into another situation where I think adding another exception and allowing the zoning administrator to waive such screening probably would be appropriate. And this is the example I'll point to dealing with Pacelli. They're looking at reconstructing their existing lot, parking lot. And a good chunk of the separation between, there's a significant amount of separation with kind of a recreational field between them or that existing parking lot and the multifamily development that is to its south. Our current code would require complete screening of the parking lot, which, as you can see, is outlined in red. However, this area here becomes somewhat challenging and I think somewhat unnecessary in terms of the actual screening of the lot. It doesn't do much for the screening with having the recreational field to its south and then apartment complex to even further south than that. The screening here against the street, you know, if you're adjacent to very close adjacency to another lot of record or another development, it makes a lot of sense. But when you have these significant amounts of gaps between two lots of record, and the way we've written this is if there's more than 100 feet between the two lots of record, that the zoning administrator would have the ability to waive that screening requirement. And that's the ordinance amendment that we'd be looking at having approved tonight.
Okay, any questions for the director before I open the public hearing? Okay, then we will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony, step forward. Alder Nabel.
Again, I'm still Cindy Nabel, District 3, and I'm speaking because District 3 has the encroachment of parking lots in our area that will make a difference on the snow where if you only have 100 feet and then you have houses. Right now, we have it where houses are right up to the back of a parking lot, and then the snow is pushed into a corner of that lot, and that drainage is an issue. It sits there as a mountain, so that's one. And secondly, I just not happy with the 100 feet only of separation, because I think you do need to have the greenery too. If you're going to end up with parking lots being pushed further into neighborhoods, where there's residential living, then I think it needs to be screened still at 100 feet, and where you're able to have still your snow, but then a screening before the people have that right in their backyards. I'm not sure if I'm looking at this the wrong way, but it just seems like a lot. Is this only for if there's less than 50 spaces that you would not have 100 feet?
Alder, we'll answer the questions after the public hearing.
I'm just double checking. That's why I'm asking.
Okay.
No, that's for island landscaping, so sorry, that's wrong. So I still feel that there should be screening if it's going to be, that's a big difference from 100 feet to the 300 feet. When you're showing that, the 100 feet would still have to have snow. I guess I'd like it to be a little bit more than 100 feet. If 200, possibly, but I don't think it should be just 100. Just seems like you're really right into their yard then.
Thank you. Public hearing is still open.
Bernice Savanek, 1017 Jasmine Lane. I have a question. Okay.
Okay.
The lot, I can see it up there. You're talking about they want to expand their parking lot?
You want to reconstruct the parking lot?
Reconstruct the parking lot, and do they want to add more to it?
I don't believe so, Director.
Okay. So, but the screening you're talking about is around the parking lot, would be around the parking lot after it's reconstructed?
Yes, and we
And
really
why-
should get to those questions after the public hearing, but
Okay. Well, because I used to live near Pacelli High School. And on the south end of Pacelli's property is the Prentice Arms Apartments. And a number of years ago, quite a few years ago, there was a water problem with a winter probably like we've had and haven't had for a long time. But anyhow, There was maintenance of the property line, and then, so they put up a fence. And then they put in these tiles to shift the drainage off that end of the park when you have a hard rain or something, it does get there. So I'm wondering if that would affect that at all. That's why I was wondering where the screening would go, if it went on the parking lot or down further, hiding it from Prentice Arms Apartments.
We'll get to we'll have the director answer your question after the public hearing.
My public hearing stuff is off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open. Alder Jennings. And we'll get to Alder Morrow, yes?
Tori Jennings, Alder District 1. This is in my district. I have not had anyone contact me about this. And my understanding is it's reconstruction, so it's resurfacing. And so there hasn't been a fence there. What people are accustomed to seeing is no fence there, and there hasn't been, to my knowledge, any complaints about that, and no one has come forward to say that they want this or don't want this. But I think if the fence went up, there might possibly be resistance to that just because of the lay of the landscape. It's going to create I don't know the correct language for it, but a blockier, more obstructive kind of look and feel is my sort of assumption. But thank you.
Thank you. Alder Morrow.
Sean Morrow, 2509 Falcons Cove, District 11. I think that Pacelli is in need of trying to redo their lot, but I know around here, if they want to put anything in, this is often used a lot for homecoming. They have games there, and folks will have their lawn chairs out and so on. I don't think they're going to need to expand that lot at all. I know when my son was there last year, they had more than enough parking for students, staff. It would only get busy if they had specific events. But I'm not exactly sure what kind of fencing would be needed. I know if there was any, I think it would be highly contested because a lot of that space is also used for when there's games, there's football practices and so on and so forth, and folks will camp out there and have the lawn chairs and so on. But it does need to be redone. I'm glad that they're being able to also do that. Thanks.
Thank you. Public hearing is still open. Public hearing is still open. Alder Nabel again. We're going to try and get you to put all your comments in one rather than
I almost
twice.
didn't come tonight, so this is interesting. Cindy Nabel, District 3. I'm just hoping everybody's understanding this is not just about Pacelli.
Right.
This is the zoning for all areas.
This is the example right now.
Example, but some people thought it was just Pacelli's. And it is talking about screening and changing of any parking lots throughout town. So I'd have no problem with a conditional use being able to be asked for, but to do a blanket change like this, I think is quite a bit of a change. And so, again, depending on where this is located and what's near it should be taken in consideration on if there's a change in screening law ability. So I would really hope that we wouldn't put ourselves in a spot where now we haven't thought about it, how it's going to affect somewhere else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Public hearing is still open. Public hearing is still open. Public hearing is still open. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commission. A couple of things. First of all, the ordinance change says that landscape screening may be waived. We'll have staff review those on a case-by-case basis. This Pacelli is just used as an example. The reason that Pacelli is being used as an example is they fall under the old parking lot standards. We've changed them. Because it's a complete reconstruct, not just a resurface or a repair, because it's a reconstruct, they're now required to meet our current parking lot standards, which brings us to this case here. Director, there were a couple of questions. Can you talk to those, please?
Yeah, so again, this is for an ordinance change that would affect all properties equally, not just for Pacelli, but they're used as this example because they're looking at reconstruct this and kind of which led to our recommendation of changing the zoning ordinance. So this example here, just to be clear, that we're saying that if a parking lot is set back 100 feet or more from a property line is when the screening may be waived. It doesn't mean any lot can just have screening waived. It's for these situations where we have these massive lots that are separated by large fields such as this one. The area in red under our current ordinance is what Pacelli would be required to screen. If we would modify our zoning ordinance to allow this change, they would have to screen essentially the parking lot from Prentice Street. They wouldn't have to screen this, and quite honestly, what we found is that a situation like this landscaping gets trampled. They use it for Pacelli Panacea, they've got sporting events, this landscaping looks good for about a year, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and it becomes very burdensome to do, and it really doesn't provide a significant positive impact of screening the parking lot. Now, while it may add to aesthetics in terms of increased landscaping on the site, the intent of screening the parking lot is effectively accomplished by having a 350-foot buffer from the neighboring property to the south. Same thing with the area to Maria Drive. So that's what this is. It isn't just waiving for any lot. It's in situations where the parking lot is set back at least 100 feet, where the zoning administrator could waive those requirements. I think our furthest setback for parking right now in our zoning code minimum would be 25 feet within the residential multifamily zones. So this is 4 times greater than that for that screening to take place. It does occur regardless if it's less than 50 spaces. Again, snow storage, they pile snow here, and if landscaping is there, that snow that landscaping gets trampled by that snow plowing, and they'd have to probably look at other alternatives for snow storage within that area. I think that's it.
Okay. And so again, I want to stress that the ordinance change would affect everything. So it could apply to several instances, but it's only the areas that have at least 100 feet of separation where we may waive the screening requirement. And it would be, again, on a case-by-case basis, subject to staff consideration, and that's not a guarantee that we would waive it, nor does it affect anything less than that. We're not waiving everybody's screening requirements, just in certain situations where it creates something unusual like this. Okay, commissioners, what are your wishes? Alder Kneebone? You got any?
Yes, I picked up on that too, where it says may be waived, not that it will be waived.
Correct.
And we hire city staff because they have the education and the experience and the judgment that they need to make decisions like this. So in my mind, allowing our professional staff to look at a piece of property and say, you know what, we can waive it this time, that's good enough for me. So I will move approval of the amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rice. Discussion?
I just got a couple, I think. I had the by whom would it be waived, and that would.
Zoning administrator.
Do you specify that, or is that implied?
It's the zoning administrator within the ordinance.
All right. And does the setback apply only to opposing, I guess, property lines, not perpendicular? Like you wouldn't have to go 100 feet from Prentice Street to extend that landscaping, right?
Right, opposing, because you're screening the parking from the area to the south on this side of the site.
In this example.
They would have to do on the east side of the site, so yes, opposing lots. Yep.
All right, good. Just a couple clarifications. Thanks.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 14 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to once again amend Chapter 23 of the zoning ordinance of the revised municipal code, specifically in this case, Section 23.02, Sub 1, Sub E, to allow the use of tourist rooming houses as a permitted or conditional use within the R3 single and two-family residential zoning districts. Page 136 of your packets, Commissioners. Director.
This was before you last month. The recommendation was to proceed in this direction, so the formal ordinance amendment is before you.
Okay. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this, step forward, please. Public hearing is still open. Alder Shore.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission. David Shore, 2nd District, Alder. So how does this stand in relation to R2 then, which is?
So everything in R3 also includes everything in R2?
Nope. Just opposite.
Oh, it's the other way around?
So
R2
this-
includes everything in
so
R3?
like, I will just
Sorry?
speak- So within the R3 district, if it's an owner-occupied tourist rooming house, this would be permitted use within the R3 district. If it's not owner-occupied, then it would be a conditional use. That would then go to the R4, R5, R E1, and so forth. R2 would not allow tourist rooming houses at this point.
District 2 is mostly R2. So I'll just offer my own view. Having stayed in an Airbnb just this last weekend, I'm very much in favor of them. Myself really would not see a problem in single-family homes. And as I say, I'm generally supportive with the only strong feeling that owner-occupied is important. I really think that is a key.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open. Alder Nabel, you want to wait and go twice the next time?
Cindy Nabel, District 3, I think it should be R2. I mean, we're already getting everything on R3. I just am annoyed that it's always, everything is R3, just absorbs everything. So why not do R2? It should be 2. If you think it's okay for R3, it should be okay for R2 also. And there should be maybe a restriction on the number of the places that are in certain areas. But I just think it really should be R2 also. I mean, we're protecting, what we keep saying is not being fair to the other areas and how we're taking care of ability for people to affordable housing and everything. But one district, or one, not one district, but one area seems to always be left alone. And I think we need to start saying, okay, it's okay for residential then also.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. For the third time, the public hearing is open. Okay, seeing no one else wishing to speak, we'll declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commissioners. Director, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, so the way the public hearing was noticed based off of the recommendation from last month was for R3. Going down to a lower classification zoning district to change that use would be inappropriate and would require another publication for public hearing for the R2 district. If
And we
that
could
is
certainly do that
if that is
next
the
month.
desire of this commission and ultimately the common council, we can bring another ordinance amendment to allow it in R2, similar to what we have for R3. But I would recommend at least proceeding with the R3 because it's already been noticed and published. But we can bring it back next month for R2 if that's the desire of this commission.
Okay, commissioners, thoughts?
Just a question, I guess, Director. What was the timeline? Because my understanding is that this did roll out in R4 temporarily. What's the timeline from R4 to now, I guess, that initial rollout?
I think we're at a year or two.
A year or two, okay.
2017, I think you're right, Kyle.
Sure.
When we had R4, we had 2 or 3 legal requests.
Right, okay. Yeah, I guess my initial feeling, I, to some extent, want to agree with Alder Nabel that there's certainly probably people who reside in the R2 zoned areas who maybe would be interested in this, but it does kind of open up much more of the city to that, but probably would be a lot more pushback from neighbors of those areas, as they are less dense and maybe used to, you know, the single-family homes and the owner-occupied homes as opposed to some of the R3 areas of town. I guess my other potential concern or question would be, when we add an ordinance or change an ordinance that potentially will affect property owners, people who would be interested in participating in these programs, how do we communicate that to the city so that people, one, know that they could do it, and two, so that they're doing it legally and that they're going through the application process?
Sure. Typically, what we do is, well, we have the public notices and then the public hearings. We've been talking about this one for a couple of months already. We don't send it out in like a news blast or anything. We don't have that. If this gets approved, we'll have it posted on our website so people can find it that way. We had media here, but they've left now. But we'll make sure that, I meet with them every Tuesday, so we'll make sure that they're aware of it, try and get it on publications, so people do it correctly, and that's really what the key is. We want them to follow the rules.
Exactly.
I think to add to that, we would just have a dedicated website, given the room tax that's due and given the county permit that's due. We would probably create a city dedicated web page just to this, kind of a one-stop shop for all those who are currently operating or would like to operate, to get all the information they need and walk through the appropriate approvals.
Great, thank you.
Okay, commissioners, what are your wishes?
So I will add, you know, thinking about this from an R2 and an R1 and an RLD perspective, as we start going backwards within the zoning code, while your density typically it's less dense as you go back further, your lot size starts to get greater, having probably a less chance of having an impact on an adjacent neighbor. So I don't think there's even really a huge concern of bringing it all the way back down just through the residential zoning districts in a similar format beyond R2, just because of the size of lots start to significantly increase as you go beyond or less than the R2 district. So if that's an interest, what we can do is we can notice the public hearing to have it start in the lowest classification district. If the Plan Commission and Council ultimately decide, you know what, we want to stick with R2, that would be proper because we've noticed it in a lower classification.
And we can do that next month.
Yep.
But at this point, we would be looking for a approval of the existing proposal, if you were so inclined.
I'll move approval.
Thank you. Seconded by Alderperson Kneebone. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 15 is the Community Development Department's monthly report for April.
April, so again, start of a good year thus far. Provident Nutraceuticals did pull their permit, which was a fairly large permit. Also, Martin Machining did break ground. However, that is not included within the April month because they didn't break ground or pull their permit until May, so that'll be seen next month. But overall, again, a very strong start to this year, nearly double that we saw in 2018. I believe we ended with about 48 million for all of 2018, and we're already at 41, not including about 7 million at Martin Machining. So very strong year. I expect that to continue over the next couple of years as well.
Good. Any questions for the director? Okay, then I'd look for a motion to accept the report and place it on file. Alderman Kneebone?
So moved.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Arntzen. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item 16 is the Community Development Department's annual report for 2018. Director, did we get this up on the website yet?
It's included within the packet, but we'll have it up on our website as
Separately.
an individual item. And tonight, I'd be happy to go through it page by page, or I would be happy to answer questions.
Why don't we do this? If there's any current questions, we can have the commissioners or the public ask. And if everybody wants to take it home, review it. If there's questions, you can certainly contact the director or bring it back to next month's Plan Commission meeting. We'll have an item on here to discuss the annual report for 2018, should anyone have any questions. Any questions currently? Okay, then we will move on to the director's update, number 17.
Just still finalizing comp plan. We're getting it sent to proofing right now, so that'll be in front of you hopefully in June, but that should be coming shortly. That's kind of it at this point.
Thank you very much, and our agenda is exhausted. We will adjourn at 8:10.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.